Alrighty folks, so today we are taking on a project that I've kind of been putting off doing for a little while. The end of last year I noticed that the clutch was starting to slip a little bit on the farm truck, and so I went ahead and picked up the parts, and now several months later I feel like I've procrastinated doing it long enough, and we're gonna see if we can't get this stuff swapped out. So what we've got is we've got a new clutch plate. We've got a new clutch under there. We've got new, I think that's the pilot bearing. And then we've got the, I think this is a throwout bearing. And then this one right here, this is a new rear main seal, which goes on the back of the engine where the drive shaft, I guess, comes out the back of the engine. It's one of those things that regardless of whether or not needs replacing, if you've got your transmission off, you go ahead and replace that as well while you've got everything disassembled. So I have a feeling this project is just, it's one of these things that's just not going to go smoothly. Sometimes I at least have some hope that the project's going to go well. This one I don't. I know how rusty different things are on the truck and how hard bolts are to get removed and all that sort of stuff. So I think this is just going to be one of those projects. So I think I've procrastinated long enough. So it's time that we get in there, start getting stuff taken apart, getting all the wires disconnected from the transmission, and start working on seeing if we can't get that thing pulled out of there and get a new clutch in. After way too much fussing around with this, although admittedly probably not more than I was expecting to have to do, we've got basically everything loosened, disconnected, all that kind of good stuff. Hey kitty, she came over to say hi. I think we're just about ready to drop the transmission out of here. All that we've got left is 6 bolts that connect the transmission to the engine, and I've already got them loosened up. And over here we've got a super duper overly long extension for the ratchet, and we're gonna see if we can't loosen those things up and drop that out of there. Hopefully there's nothing that I've missed that's still holding stuff together, but I think it's disconnected. There we go. I think that might be separated enough that we can get in and do what we need to do. All right, so we got the our clutch and the pressure plate off of here. So this is our clutch. This is the pressure plate here. And in case you aren't overly familiar with how a manual transmission works, over here we've got our engine, and our flywheel is connected directly to the engine. Then our clutch plate, this part right here, just this little disc, that kind of sits right in here. Now if your clutch pedal is pushed in, your clutch disc is not in contact with your flywheel. But once your clutch pedal releases out, your let me get your pressure plate, which is this part down here, pushes the clutch disc against the flywheel, and then that puts power into your transmission. Now you'll notice that the inside of the clutch plate has a splined shaft in there. So this connects into the transmissions. So that means that when your clutch disc turns, that's going to cause your transmission to turn, which then puts power to the wheels. Hopefully that kind of made some sort of sense. Both of these items right here are going to get replaced. I just figured, for as relatively inexpensive as the stuff is, might as well just go ahead and replace all of this while we got it torn apart. I don't think I'm going to replace the flywheel. We've still got to pull that off. I think that should be fine. But once we'll pull that off, get a little bit better look at it while it's not underneath the truck, and tell for sure. But I don't think we're going to end up replacing that. Now, the next thing that we're going to work on is getting the pilot bearing out. And I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to show this or not, but that is what the end of the shaft for the transmission kind of sits into. So it kind of rests inside the pilot bearing, and then the splines come out and fit into there. And that keeps the end of that transmission shaft from kind of flopping around. It just gives a little bit of support on the end of that. Yeah. All right. I'm not sure how well you guys can see there. I think you can see all right. But right now you're looking down through where normally the shifter would be coming up into the cab of the truck, up through the hole that you're looking down through. And actually you might have a better view than I do. I'm trying to come from underneath here. So right here, this is our pilot bearing. And this is what the end of the transmission goes into here. And, well, the transmission shaft, I guess that would be. So what we're going to do is they make an actual pilot bearing remover. There's these little prongs that go in there and hook on the back side of your pilot bearing and pull it out. I don't have one of those. Another method that's actually listed in my repair manual almost looks like it's pulling the middle of the bearing out. That's interesting. Hey, there we go. Now we'll have to clean all this up in here before we put the new one back in. All right, well, we got the pilot bearing out finally. As you saw, I had to get the actual tool in order to get this thing out of here, and it came out in two parts. I ended up needing to do a little bit of adjustments on this tool. This is a high quality Harbor Freight item here, and these little inner pieces that go on the inside of the bearing, and then when you twist this part in, it makes these spread apart like that, and then that grabs onto the inside of the bearing, and then we twist this nut down. That's what pulls this in like that and pulls your bearing out. These guys were a little bit rounded, like right on the edges, even right when I got it brand new. Not not even after it pulled out of the bearing a few times, but it didn't have a very sharp corner on there. So I took these and I used the cutoff disc on the angle grinder to kind of just grind that down a little bit, get a nice sharp edge coming out to the end of those little whatever you want to call them, the little part that sticks out there. Get a nice sharp edge on there. I really cranked this down, got it in tight, and then I was able to get it to pull out at that point. But it would not grab it before I got those sharpened up just a little bit. So as you saw, we got that out, got the flywheel out. So I think at this point the last thing that needs to get taken out is the rear main seal, and that's on the back of the engine. It doesn't look like it was leaking. I do have some leakage around the oil pan itself, but it doesn't look like the main seal was leaking. But it's one of those things where when you got it torn apart this far, you just go ahead and switch it, put a new one in, and then you don't have to worry about it down the road. Ooh, hey, just like that. Boom. Cool. Not sure if it's just not going on or whether the ID of this is a little too small. I think it's going on. I think it's going on. Now they do make a special tool for doing this, but I figured this thing would work just as well. And so far, it seems to be. Although it is getting a little bit snug. Trying to do it without hitting myself in the head with the hammer too. Well, that looks pretty well seated to me. I'm going to go back and look at the video footage and see if it looks like that's about as far in as it was to start with, but I think so. More or less hold that thing in place. Put one of the top transmission bolts back in, and there's a little alignment peg over here, so that'll hold that in place while I get the flywheel back up here and bolted on. Okay, that actually wasn't terrible. I'm just lightly, well, I'm getting them screwed in place, and that'll hold the flywheel on here. But I need to put some Loctite on each one of these before I thread them in all the way, and then I'll have to torque them down to a certain torque spec as well while I do that. Well, the first two went in all right. This one's not wanting to get threaded. These are all evenly spaced, aren't they? Oh, wait a minute. Are they? Oh, hold up. Okay, hold on. Hold on. Okay, I'm gonna take this thing back off again. Yeah. So that is definitely not all lined up there. Hey, that looks pretty good like that. Yeah. That is interesting. Okay. Probably got my head right in the way so you can't see what's going on, can you? Alright. So now that we got it going the right way and they all line up, we can get the rest of these in. Yeah, that was good. Alright, let's try this again. Be a little more careful this time. So one thing I've learned from this is that it's not worthwhile trying to use that grease method. because it may or may not work. And even if it does, you're still going to spend a whole bunch of time trying to clean all that out of there. And even if it doesn't, you're still going to spend all this time trying to clean it out of there. And it's kind of a pain. So just go to Harbor Freight, buy the $20 tool, and be done with it. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. I like it. I got our brand new pilot bearing here. And not sure if we can knock this in with the mount. We might have to, yeah. I think we got to get something to seat it in there with. Sounds like it's seated. All right, that's in. Alright, so all those bolts that you just saw me torque down, I just got to loosen them up and then re-torque them down again off camera. And it was because of this little guy right here. So this is a clutch alignment tool. And so this is my old clutch. This goes through your clutch plate, and then this goes into the pilot bearing that we replaced. And so this keeps everything nice and centered. It gets your clutch plate right where it needs to be, so that when you bring your transmission back over, this is, there we go. This is basically the same thing as what the end of the transmission shaft looks like. So it just gets everything aligned up. Well, after I'd gotten everything torqued down the first time, I went to pull this back out, and it was jammed right in there. It would not come out. So that kind of told me that probably this was not quite aligned right in there, and it was kind of torquing down on this alignment tool, and that's why it wouldn't come out. So I loosened up all the bolts again, kind of re-jiggled this around in there, tried getting it a little bit better seated, and then torqued everything back down, and then tried pulling on it again, and it popped right out that time. So I think it was just a little bit off center in there. It wasn't quite right, and so got to do it a couple times. So I think at this point we're ready to try connecting the transmission back up, and hopefully the transmission shaft will just slide right into the clutch and into the pilot bearing, and it'll just go together real nice and smooth. But my understanding is that this is the part that people normally have some issues with, so it'll be fine. Okay, so actually I forgot about one thing, and that is that we need to replace this thing. I think this is the throwout bearing, maybe, but this is what pushes up against the pressure plate, and then this can spin on the end here. So I think, I'm not sure, I'm hoping this just kind of slides off the end, maybe. Ooh. Well, I hope that was supposed to come off like that. Okay. Sure, why not? So there's the old one. It doesn't look in too bad a shape. Still spins pretty good. It's got a little bit of noise in it, but it feels nice and smooth. The new one, definitely, you can feel it's I think it's got more grease and stuff in there, so it's a lot quieter. So this will be good to get this replaced out. Yeah, sure, why not? I obviously know what I'm doing. Last thing to do is take a little bit of this spline grease, spline lubricant, and put it on the transmission shaft here. And I've already put some on that release bearing that we put in just a minute ago. I didn't show that, but got some on that. And you really don't need much here on this transmission shaft either. If you get too much, then apparently you can have issues with the grease being flung off of the shaft, and it'll get on your clutch, and then that'll make your clutch slip because it gets grease on it. And of course that's no good. So just a light coating on the whole thing, and then you're good to go, theoretically, I hope. Alright, so we're jumping ahead a little bit here. I've been fussing around with this for a little bit, and I was getting it pretty close to being matched up, getting the transmission, you know, right tight up against the engine. But I was having an issue that I couldn't push on it hard enough and try and looking down at this side to make sure everything was lined up to get the alignment pins and stuff in place. So what I did is I grabbed a ratchet strap and I ran it around the back of the jack, so that way I could keep pressure on it this way while I could kind of align stuff up, kind of rotating it a little bit to get everything matched up the way it was supposed to be. So I've got one of the bolts started in there, so that's going to hold that in place. And now I think I'm good to release the tension on this, and then hopefully I can go around and get the rest of these bolts started in there and get this thing tightened back up and have that reconnected. Okay, didn't move much. It moved a little bit, but it wasn't too bad. And now we should be able to get this kind of adjusted around the rest of the way so that we can get all the rest of our bolts put in. Alrighty, folks. Well, it's back on. I got all the main bolts back in that connect the transmission to the engine. I really couldn't show you guys it that well just because there's not a lot of room under there, and there's not many places where I can set the camera so that you can see what's going on, and the camera's not in my way and I'm not kicking the camera. And so yeah, just it's on there. I'll show you guys some B-roll here in a second, but I'm gonna make this a part 1 and to be continued, because I've got to figure out what I'm going to do for the transmission cross member, this little thing right here. Because obviously this side is not in great shape. It should look more like that, but that's all we got left on this side. So I've got, I don't know, a couple few options, I guess. I was hoping that I would just be able to go online, get on like Rock Auto or something, and just buy a new piece for this and order it and just have it in and swap it out. Unfortunately, I was not able to find that on a site. That's not to say that I couldn't have missed it. I'm going to be doing some more looking around again, but I have not been able to find anywhere that sells these as, like, you know, new parts, not even like just new old stock, but just, you know, someplace that makes them. Can't find it. I found one that came up on eBay, and it was way more than I wanted to spend on this. I would have spent more on a new one of these than I did for the clutch plate, the pressure plate, the pilot bearing, the throwout bearing. I could have bought probably could have gotten a new flywheel, and all that would have cost less than buying this used cross member. But that was the only place that I could find one for sale. So I'm going to kind of keep an eye out for that sort of stuff, but so far I haven't seen anything that was reasonably priced, or at least what I thought was reasonably priced. Another option would be to possibly go around to some junkyards and see if I can't find one that's in decent shape and pull it. That's not really something I want to do, because this was kind of a pain getting this one out of here. But if that's what it comes down to, I guess I can look into try doing that. But it would definitely be, it would be a project to pull one out, and it might be a challenge finding one that's in good shape as well. I don't know if this is a common thing that starts rusting out on this generation of truck. So that's another option. A third option would be to try making something. I do have a welder, and I've got, you know, angle grinder and a cutting torch, and so I could probably make something, maybe. If that's what I need to do, I could probably try making something. Again, that's not maybe optimal. It's not what I'd rather do. Again, I'd rather just find another one of these that's reasonably priced, save a lot of work. But you know, if that's what I got to do, then I'll may go that route instead. And I guess there may be some other options. If you guys know of anything, you're like, Josh, this is the way you need to go with this. Check this item out or whatever. There very well could be some other options out there for what to do for replacing this thing out. But for the time being, those are kind of the three things that I've got for options that I know of to get this transmission crossmember replaced. So that was a very long-winded way of saying that this is the end of part one. This is going to be continued, and I don't know exactly what the next part's going to be, whether it'll be making some new crossmember or tearing a crossmember out of some other truck, or what it's going to be. But we'll definitely be getting a part 2 to this as we try and figure out how to get this thing fixed up and back into working order. So that, I think, is going to be it for part 1 of this project. As always, I appreciate you guys watching, and I will see you next time.